Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Movie Mates video. I am Matthew, of course, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Colin.
Hey man, lovely to see you. So on today's video, we have another mini review, and this time it's of quite a recent release, and it is the latest musical biopic, I suppose you could refer it to. It's Stardust, which is a film about David Bowie's life and touring America. So I'm going to pass over to Cam to explain more in detail about what the film's about, when it released and those kind of things. So yeah, off to you, man.
So this film came out widely, across America in 2020, but it has only been recently released on digital. So it's been made available to us now in
Yes.
2021. So for us, this is a fairly recent release. The film's plot revolves around David Bowie's American tour following the lackluster reception to his album, "The Man Who Sold the World" in America, and him proving to America that he's a star and that his album can be a success. So this was an odd film going in,
It was.
because this film was not sanctioned by the Bowie estate, and they weren't allowed use of his songs. So this is sort of a bizarre biopic where he doesn't actually play any of his own music,
Yeah, it just
and it
covers,
is
isn't it?
it is bizarre throughout.
It's so strange. I think it's a big mistake. It's so
Oh, massively.
David Bowie's got some of those iconic songs of all time, and the fact that the way I was really harsh in this movie opening, because I think the more and it went on, the more it grew on me, to be honest with you. But I
Hmm.
think obviously from a non-spoiler perspective first, I think the fact that the Bowie estate, like you said, didn't grant the um, cinematic company the use of these songs. Don't make the film, then. You know what I mean? Like it just that's how
Yeah,
I viewed it.
absolutely.
It's like having Bohemian Rhapsody without Queen. It's like having Yesterday without Beatles. Do you know what I mean? It's so strange.
Yeah. They don't have permission to use the songs. They don't have the support of the estate to even make the film.
Yeah,
And then the events of the film aren't even mostly accurate. It opens saying that it's a mostly fictional tale. Could you have not at least made a true biopic rather than a mostly fictional tale?
I
I wanted
know.
to learn something new about an artist I really love and respect, and now I don't even know what's true about this and what's not.
Yeah.
He doesn't even pronounce his own name correctly. We're like we're pretty much unable to because of our accent, because
Bowie.
it sounds disgusting. Yeah, no, we physically can't say it without doing like a
Yeah,
mock American accent. So
yeah.
it's not possible for us to say.
It isn't.
And it is in the end a made up name. And David Bowie didn't have a problem with people mispronouncing it. But would he really mispronounce it himself?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a really good point. I think the fact that the movie doesn't really draw the line between what is fact and what is fiction, like you said, buddy. I was on Wikipedia, like trying to figure out what actually happened in real life, what didn't, and it kind of blurs the lines between that as well. And I think if we're going to talk about the casting of Johnny Flynn as Bowie, I think he's absolutely phenomenal here. I think he's
Hmm,
absolutely incredible, but he's not David Bowie to me.
yeah.
I think that's the main issue there.
Yeah, when it comes to physical likeness, I think he is sensational, and I think he's an amazing actor. And I've seen him in other things, and he is genuinely fantastic. But the presence is wrong, and I think it's to do with the film he's in. I think there's nothing wrong about his performance. It is absolutely the film that he's in that is the
Absolutely.
issue. I read that he worked hard, to get the voice just right, and for me that work isn't fully evident. But I think that's honestly less important than the look, because David Bowie was so visually striking, and I think that is fairly well realized. As much as conceivably can be, because he was such a unique figure.
Yeah, completely. I remember watching the film Labyrinth when I was younger. I think that's what a lot of people relate to David Bowie, especially, as well as his music. And
Mhm.
yeah, for me, I think the look is there. I saw a lot of people say, "Oh, he looks nothing like Bowie," things like that. But I think he actually does, portray a reasonable resemblance to him as well. And with that being said, yeah, I think the presence isn't there. Like the movie tonally, it feels really off to what I would have thought it would be. I'm not
Mhm.
sure. It kind of I don't know. It feels to me like this would maybe belong better as like a mini series or something where you get to spend more time with the
Yeah.
character. I don't know. I think it may be, a movie that's approaching the 2 hour length is maybe a mistake. I think maybe a TV show would have been better.
Mm. And we've talked about David Bowie's music, and the fact that this film doesn't have any. I was just wondering, just to get to know you better.
Favorite
As
Bowie
friends
song?
of many years, I don't know, what is your favorite David Bowie song?
I had that question to ask you as well. Mine is Changes. I know that's quite a cliche one.
Ooh,
That's got to be probably one of my favorite Bowie songs. But yeah, what about yourself?
I mean, I'm gonna go more cliche because if I'm honest, Matthew, I've not heard Changes. Did you say?
Yeah, oh, you might have actually.
Yeah,
Have you seen Shrek 2?
not in many
No,
years.
it's in that film where Shrek is like nice and handsome. He's turned human and he walks in the
Mm,
land of far, far away, and that song's just blaring in the background. It's a really good one. Yeah. What about
yeah,
yourself?
I'm also gonna go a bit cliche, but sometimes it's one of the most popular because it's the best. My favorite's Starman.
Of course. No, absolutely, absolutely. I remember there's a Rick and Morty is a show we both love. Of
Hmm.
course, there's a famous song in that Goodbye Moon Men. And that's a Bowie. It's not maybe a Bowie song, but by the title, but the lyrics are the same, aren't they? Reasonably to a certain song of
Well, I mean,
his.
it's heavily influenced, by the sort of psychedelic side of David Bowie, but I don't think it may be lyrically similar, but I'm not
Yeah.
fully aware. Yeah,
Hmm.
there's a Starman. Uh, you know, I'm just singing it to myself, but
Yeah, it's a good tune.
yeah, and
It's a
then
really good tune.
goodbye Moon Man. Yeah, there is definitely a resemblance to that,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to talk to you about this film is of course called Stardust. Same as the 2007 film starring Charlie Cox.
Yeah.
Bit of an inconvenient Google, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I got
You have
the
to
original
Google
one comes up first.
Stardust 2020.
You
A
do.
bit annoying, but
Absolutely
I
do.
think we need to talk about how lazy the titles of musical biopics are. We've had Elton John's Rocket Man, we've had you know Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. Just naming the song after the most famous song. Sorry, naming the movie after the most famous song is just lazy.
It is.
And
No, it
here, I
absolutely
don't know
is.
whether it's better or worse. Because to be honest, I feel like they only didn't call this film, Life on Mars or Starman is because they didn't have the rights to do so.
Yeah.
But also this film is about the events leading up to the creation of Stardust. Like, this film is about the events leading up to the creation of the persona of Ziggy Stardust. This film is about David Bowie, though, so
Yes.
it feels sort of bizarre that it's called Stardust because it's not about Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah, it's kind of like, calling, you know, I don't know, it's like calling a Superman film Clark Kent, the movie, it's kind of that sort of similar vibe there. Sort of the alter ego of David Bowie, so to speak. But I think it's really interesting because, like you said, there's problems here with the rights, for the title of the film as well. And it kind of got me thinking, of course the Bowie estate didn't grant permission, but one thing what I found really fascinating when I was googling about David Bowie and his life is that his son Duncan Jones is a really well-known movie director. I'm amazed they didn't get
Yeah,
him to direct this or something like that, or or a film about his dad. I don't know. Maybe they didn't get on or didn't see each other. I don't know the full history of it, of course, but I don't know. Just on the basis of that, I don't know. It kind of seems weird.
yeah. To my knowledge, the two of them are close, but Duncan Jones was very adverse to the idea of this film. He is sort of one of the most vocal critics against the idea of them doing this film.
Oh, really?
I don't. Obviously there's a huge catalog of excellent music that they could have within a sanctioned David Bowie film, but
Yeah.
I don't know that film will ever come. Because
Yes.
I think if this film just had David Bowie's music in it, it would be sensational.
Completely.
I think
Absolutely. It
the
elevates it.
the biggest issue with this film is its inauthenticity, and it's very apparent, that they're just finding
Oh, it is.
sort of shortcuts and cutaways to make sure that they can excuse him not singing his own music. And the music that this film is sort of centered around is his album The Man Who Sold the World. And in order to sort of understand the film a little bit more, I listened to the album,
Oh,
which is why I was
wow.
a little
Nice
bit
one.
late to the recording today because it's 40 minutes long. But I didn't really have the time to sort of sit and dissect the album lyrically, but melodically it's very pleasant, and it involves nothing experimental or weird, which is how the film seems to present it. It says that
Yeah.
the Americans didn't connect because they don't like music that they have to think about, and that it was sort of weird. But I mean, it's it's not even the weirdest David Bowie music I've ever heard.
Yeah.
It's very far from anything weird or experimental. So I'm sort of surprised that I don't really know what the true sort of consensus on the album was, but the
Yeah.
consensus presented here seems false.
It's so funny, yeah, it's not, dude, because the film kind of presents that the British and American audiences, they view music very differently. Do you know what I mean? Like over,
Mhm.
back in Bowie's homeland in England, he's sort of presented like as a cult hero, as in, a lot of people think his music is so well done. I think that maybe this maybe points out, how Space Oddity was like the only hit that Americans really identified with. And maybe I'm like oblivious to the culture at the time and stuff. But it kind of seemed to me like, and I'm not sure that there is that parallel between British and American taste. Of course you do get that from time to time. I'm trying to think from a modern standpoint. You have British artists like Stormzy or people like that who aren't necessarily as popular in America. But I
Mm.
don't know, when you think of people at the time, the Beatles, just as popular as they were, maybe not as popular as they were maybe in Britain, but certainly very popular in America. I know that's a very
Yeah.
different brand of music from Bowie, but I'm not sure if that would be the case today. I think if Bowie, released this album in 2021, I think it would have been a raving success in America as well as the UK. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, we have Mark Maron's character who's, Bowie's publicist within this film. And
Hmm.
there's even a moment in the film where he's, rhyming off more successful artists, British and American.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of the British ones that he rhymes off, and I'm like, well, they're, sort of psychedelic and in the in probably a more obscurest, genre than David Bowie was. So
yeah,
it is sort of baffling to me that, he insists that because of the kind of music, or the America in this film insists that, I don't believe that this is necessarily the true interpretation of his music, but it's how the film presents the interpretation of his
hmm,
music. They sort of say that the kind of music he's making won't be successful. Like, he
yeah,
isn't the issue; it's his music. But like the music that I listen to, like from the man who sold, is it man the man who sold the world? Like,
the
it
album.
is
Yeah.
it's I wasn't like, this is exceptional, but I was like, this is David Bowie. This is as good as plenty of his other music. His
Yeah.
more popular music. So I was sort of just baffled
Oh,
by this
completely,
film, really.
completely, absolutely, yeah.
And one thing that baffled me within this film, again, was the character of Angie, who was at the time David Bowie's wife, who
Yes,
was an
yeah,
American, and so is Jenna Malone, who plays her. But the character ends up sounding Australian, or something. So
yeah.
I was very confused in the moment, because I was like, "That's Jenna Malone. She's American. They've said this character is American," and I looked it up, and Angie Bowie was American,
Hmm.
or still is. I don't know. I feel like if she's still alive, she would be quite elderly. But I listened to some interviews that she did, following David Bowie's death,
Hmm.
and at that time she just spoke with a fully American accent. But I went back to ones from the 70s or 80s, and she does speak very, very like
Oh
Jenna
wow,
Malone's
yeah. So it
performance in
wasn't
this
like
film.
a voice actor
So
thing, yeah.
yeah, so it's not inaccurate to the real life counterpart. But from the interviews, from what I can tell, her sort of mid Atlantic kind of accent seems fake.
Fake. That's so
Because
weird, isn't it?
when David Bowie died, she gave an interview on, I think it was Loose Women, because she had to come out of the Big Brother house to sort of mourn him.
Yeah,
She left the Big Brother house to do that. So in an interview, she was just speaking fully American. So it must be put on, or
yeah.
I don't know.
It's, yeah, I know it's one of those ones, buddy. Because yeah, like on the subject of Bowie's passing, I remember when he passed away, and it's weird because even now I feel like I don't have like I kind of feel sort of a little bit like I feel a little bit of shame that I haven't really appreciated his music as much as I should have, because like some of his music that some of the songs that I listen to, I have by no means listened to all of it, like his discography. I'm
Mhm.
sure he's got a lot of songs haven't listened to, but like he's so talented for the short, span of what I've listened to. I think I'm definitely gonna, this some kind of has made me consider of listening to him more, because I think he kind of goes under the radar these days. Do you know what I mean? I think, when you think of the time that he had to compete with, even up until the noughties, the UK had a lot of big successes. I mean, Bowie had, I suppose, the film even mentions, the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Rolling Stones, people like that. And of course, then you've got Queen, and then you've got a whole host of other British artists. So I think he does go under the radar these days, and I
Yeah.
definitely feel like I'm gonna check out more of his music after listening to a film that has none of his music, coincidentally. But
Yeah.
yeah, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that sort of encapsulated, how great a person he must have been to, because I mean, all of those sort of success stories that you listed off and that are listed off in the film, they're all bands, and this guy's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
solo act, and
literally,
still
yeah, that's a good
he was
point.
able to make his legacy, just as big as any of them. So it is really fantastic, and I do hope more people of our generation, come to his music. But as you mentioned, the music is not here, and there are so many performances in this movie, none of which are Bowie's music. And I feel like they could have just had him never perform. Having him perform other people's music, I think, is unnecessary and kind of insulting. I think if you want your movie to be about the man behind the music, then you can have that. In this film, if you trim the runtime, hour and 30 minutes, take out all the performances, I think it just comes across as less insulting than you being
Yes.
like, here's a musician, he's not going to perform any of his own music
Yeah,
though.
and like you sort of said earlier in this review, Callum, like when they sort of go out of the way, when he's performing on stage at these bars, at these festivals, and it feels like the movie, like you said, the editing becomes really off in those kind of scenes because it feels like the filmmakers kind of they feel uncomfortable with those scenes almost because they know they can't have David Bowie's own music, so he has to play these covers instead, which come out as insulting, really unnatural. It doesn't fit in right at all, and it even in the context of the film, it doesn't make any sense that like the film makes you feel like Bowie has to prove himself, yet he doesn't have a chance to showcase any of his own music. For me,
Yeah,
if you're going to have that plot line of him having to prove himself in America, you play your own music. You don't play covers of
yeah,
people. Do you know what I
exactly.
mean? So it felt off. It felt off. You're right.
I think we'll get into that a bit more in spoilers, because I think it is a huge part of this film and sort of a
Yeah.
black cloud that's over it the entire time.
Hmm.
And I honestly think that if you change the names of the characters and made it simply a road trip film about a musician who wants worldwide success, I think this would be critically praised. I think
Yeah, I
everything
agree.
about this film is great except its inauthenticity.
Yeah, it's really funny you mention that because yeah, I actually agree. I think if you remove sort of, I think if you maybe keep the tone of the film, I think the tone is kind of an interesting one because it kind of like we were sort of talking about. It's a guy who's sort of viewed as a little bit quirky. He doesn't really fit in with this American lifestyle, this American pop star stereotype. He's a little. People think he's weird. We see that in people sort of mock the way he dresses and silly things like that as well. I think it's really interesting if you remove that sort of just remove the name David Bowie, just remove the whole, the title of the album, just have about an up and coming musician who's had success in the UK and wants to become a global star. I think that becomes much more, maybe not necessarily compelling, but much more like, critically, praised film because as you said, there isn't the pressure there of having to have an artist music in there. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's a great idea, Callum, actually. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it would get talked about less, but anyone talking about this film is talking about it negatively.
Yeah, that's
If
a
you
really
want to
good
have this
point.
film talked
Yeah.
about positively, but by less people, I think that's the way to do it.
Hmm.
And I think one day there will be a day where they do an authentic David Bowie biopic, and I'm just disappointed that they could have saved Johnny Flynn for that film, because this is going to be his one time as David Bowie, because this film has been critically shat on. There's
Yeah.
there's no coming back from it. He's not going to play David Bowie again, and I think this film is fantastic. It's just not a good biopic, and I feel like Johnny Flynn has been really let down here.
Completely. Yeah, his performance is amazing. It's so charismatic as well. And as much as it doesn't necessarily scream Bowie to me, I think like we were sort of talking about, if you kind of remove that essence of Bowie, just the namesake, the album sake, and things like that, and just have him as a musician, it's just an um,
Hmm.
incredible movie. And I think you're right. I think it's a pity that this is his one sort of chance, and it sort of I don't know if I could compare it to sort of an analogy. It's kind of like I don't know. It sort of feels like the movie sort of like it's 70%, but they're just sort of like, yeah, it's 70% there. The missing 30% is like his music and things like that,
Hmm.
and other things. But it kind of felt like, yeah, 70% will do. We'll accept, the B grade or whatever, or in this movie's case, a really bad review. They just feel like, yeah, we just have to get something out there. Do you know what I mean? In the time being, I don't know. I think either just don't make the movie or wait until you have got the licensing to do so for the songs.
Yeah, but I think even if they had the licensing to have the songs, I still don't feel like, this represents 1-2 years in David Bowie's life.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're gonna make a David Bowie film, it needs to be his whole life, about all the trials and tribulations,
Yeah.
So I feel like this was never gonna work as a David Bowie film, even if they had the music. I feel like it still would have felt wrong. It wouldn't have felt, you know, they manage in, Bohemian Rhapsody wasn't, well received by audiences. It does show, the high points and the low points of, Freddie Mercury's life, and that's just not present here. It's just, one shitty like year or two in David Bowie's life. It's not representative of his career.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was just never going to work. And as I said, I wish they'd saved Johnny Flynn, for a different David Bowie film. But if they had to use him on this project, they could have taken 5 minutes to rewrite this film, with different names,
Yeah.
and make it a Star Is Born type,
Yes.
type
Yes.
film with Johnny Flynn, because in this film we hear some of Johnny Flynn's original music, and I feel like if you just had him, because he's a musician himself, so if you'd
Okay.
sort of just showcased his music, and had him as this up and coming star, like I feel like he could have led this film brilliantly.
For sure, absolutely. He's an actor that doesn't really get talked about enough, I think. He's absolutely
Yeah,
phenomenal here. It's a really great character study. I think he's really maybe the voice. Perfecting the voice is the evidence maybe isn't there for that, but I think in terms of he's really deaf. I think he's really studied Bowie. From the way he presents himself, the way he even moves and things like that. I think it's really great attention to detail. From Flynn there for sure. Any more remarks from you regarding non-spoiler?
no, none for me. Any more from you?
Nothing for me, buddy. So I suppose the main question is, with as this movie makes tradition, is this movie a massive hit or piece of shit? It's gonna be a tough
Well,
one.
I'm gonna rate it with that rating, but on two accounts.
Okay.
As a film, as a film watching experience, I had a great time. I had such low expectations because I knew the context, and I was
Yes.
putting this off for days. But when I sat down and watched it, I was thrilled. It was such a good film. I thought massive hit, quality of film. As a David
Lovely.
Bowie biopic, there's no music. It's not representative of his career, and I feel like it doesn't have the essence of Bowie, and I think I don't know whether it's the writing or the direction, because it's definitely not Johnny Flynn. I don't know where to pinpoint blame, but it's not a good David Bowie biopic, and I think everyone can probably agree to that. I think people are slamming it as a film a bit too hard. I saw
Yeah.
all the reviews for it were like 1 out of 5 stars, which I think is unreasonable for quality of the film. I think it's shot well, it's written well, the dialogue is good. Mark Maron's performance is very likable. So I think the film's really great. But as David Bowie biopic, piece of shit.
Yeah, I think I really would agree with that consensus for sure. You've took the words right out of my mouth, so to speak. I think, yeah, for the quality of the film, although the pacing is off for me, and at times it can be quite a slow burn. I think the fact that the performances are so good, it's incredibly well shot, and I think this is one of the best performances in the last year that I've seen from Johnny Flynn. So I'd have to give it a massive hit in that regard. But yeah, as a general biopic of a musician, I think it really misses the mark. Like we said, I think if you don't have the songs, that's a game changer, to be honest, in a negative sense. It's got to be a piece of shit for the biopic regard, which
Yeah, and
I feel
it's
bad
mostly
giving it, but
fictional. Like,
yeah, I know, yeah,
how can they claim to be a biographical film? If
yeah,
you're how are you disrespecting David Bowie that much that
I
you
know,
have a film that his family don't want made, and you're not telling his proper story? Like, it is just insulting.
it is. No, it absolutely is.
But if you want to move on to spoilers,
Yeah, go for it.
you mentioned previously about sort of the absurdity of the fact that he's not playing his own music whenever he's there to promote his new album.
Yeah,
And in the first performance that we see him give, he performs a he performs a song written by the star Johnny Flynn, and it's called "Good Old Jane." And I read an article where he was giving an interview, and he said that he intended it to sound like a lost early Bowie song that emulated Bowie's love for the Velvet Underground.
mhm,
Because apparently at the time, apparently at the time, because the man who sold the world was getting kicked critically in America, he sometimes would play covers. But in the
Okay,
narrative of the film that
cool.
they've constructed, as you mentioned for the film, he's in America to persuade them that he's a star and to make his album a success. So it is once again just insulting that the film has him play covers and never his own music.
Yeah,
And it's just a harsh kick in the teeth, kind of
that
reminder
is.
that this isn't a sanctioned biopic.
It
I mean,
absolutely
I know
is.
we've gone over that, but it is just shit of them
No, it
to have made
is.
this film.
It's
I
insulting.
was optimistic. I was like, well, David Bowie isn't alive to give permission, so his family probably knows what's best for him. But it is a tale that should be told. But it could have very easily been told better, and hopefully next time, because I think there will be a next time when it is fully
Yeah.
allowed. I hope there's a lot of oversight from the family to make sure there's a lot of accuracy there.
Yeah, I love what you said there, buddy. I think you're right. I kind of thinking, if David Bowie, you know, um, was sitting and watching this film, I kind of feel he would be caught in two ways. I actually think he would really like it. Not that we know him personally or anything like that, but I think he would kind of appreciate, the artistic vision of it and things like that. But yeah, I think like we went over like the lack of the absence of the Bowie songs here, but it really does make a massive difference, especially when the main character of the film is a musician and has his own songs, and that isn't integral to the plot. Like we've sort of likened it, Yesterday without the Beatles songs, Bohemian Rhapsody without Queen songs, Rocket Man without Elton John. We've mentioned that, but it's I don't know. I think that's definitely the main reason why it's just been critically panned, to be honest. And
Yeah,
one character that you mentioned, buddy, or one actor, was it Mark Mahan or something? Did you say
Marin.
Marin? Mark Marin. Now is he
It
his
may be
like
Mayron or something.
Mayra?
I don't know,
We'll go
but
with Marin. He was his American assistant, wasn't he? That's like helping get all the tours and stuff, wasn't it? Yeah.
yeah, his publicist. Yeah.
I think he's definitely one of my favorite characters in the film. I think that performance is absolutely incredible. Well,
Hmm.
it's one of those characters, I wasn't really expecting it from, but I just like, I'm not sure if he actually was he has an in real life counterpart, because like we said, some of the movie is fictional, so it's hard to really
Yeah.
actually
I,
know.
I, I did look it up, and that person does exist, and he passed away recently.
Oh,
I believe in 2019.
sorry to hear that.
But
Yeah,
I don't. I doubt a lot of this. I think this
yeah,
tour, to my knowledge, did happen, and some of the events are, you know, are loosely, adapted. But this character definitely did exist. He was responsible for, being David Bowie's publicist. But yeah, I imagine some of the details are fairly murky.
yeah, for sure. And the movie kind of got me thinking, with the whole atmosphere of, with the tour and this artist being quite, I'm not sure if quirky is the right word, but quite sort of to the public masses, people think of him as unusual. The British sense of music doesn't really resonate with Americans. It kind of got me thinking, I'd love a Bob Dylan one of these with like actual Bob Dylan music.
Mm.
What about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there was a film where they sort of did this fun thing where they had uh yeah, it was a film about Bob Dylan. It wasn't strictly a biopic,
Hmm.
but throughout it they had multiple different actors playing Bob Dylan.
Oh, really?
And I would
Oh,
say the
wow.
most famous look for it was probably Kate Blanchett. They had some men, some but they sort of portrayed the sort of different time periods within his life. And I haven't seen that film, but I'd be greatly interested to.
Hmm.
I don't think it involves his music, so I would sort of like to see a straight biopic. I don't know that his life is, I don't really know anything about Bob Dylan's life. More just
Yeah, me
his
neither.
music. So
Hmm.
I don't know whether it's an interesting story to tell.
Yes, it seems to similar thing with the Walk the Line, Johnny Cash biopic as well.
Hmm.
I haven't seen that, but I've heard good things about, obviously, James Mangold as well, director of Logan. So I'm
Yeah,
sure I'm sure it's a good
Johnny
one.
Cash has a very interesting life story.
Yeah, so I'm told. So I'm told. I remember you told me a story a few years ago about like he nearly like killed a lot of birds or something, something like
Oh
setting
well,
his
he
truck on
did kill
fire.
a lot of birds.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, shall I
Man.
rehash the story
Yeah,
quickly?
go for it. Go for it. Because I
So
forget.
from memory, I heard the story many years ago, and I'll preface it with allegedly. Uh, Johnny Cash definitely allegedly took his I believe it was his sister's camper van, with her son, his nephew, into the forest for camping, and he referred to the camper as the party bus, and then somehow a fire erupted. I think presumably slash allegedly he was on drugs, and the fire sort of consumed the forest, and apparently allegedly killed nearly an entire species of birds.
My
I think it
days.
was, I don't remember the exact figure. I think it was 43 out of 47. It was something like that. It was a very rare species of bird that he made nearly go entirely extinct.
That is crazy. That is that is a mad story. That is crazy. That deserves its own report one day, perhaps. Um, but yeah, I think in regards to specific scenes in the film, of course, you've brought up the opening performance. I think my favorite scene in the film has to be the radio scene where it's sort of portrayed that the radio station that David Bowie is going on. It's quite conservative. They like their rock music. That's it. David Bowie just goes on there and says like, yeah, rock's overrated. That's not what I'm about. I'm not really a huge fan of rock, and he's just there swearing away in this really conservative radio show. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Of course, probably didn't happen in real life, but it's one of the scenes that
No, I
I
wouldn't
quite
have
liked.
imagined so.
I quite liked that snuck in there.
And the goal of the character that Mark Maron plays is to eventually get David Bowie on the cover of Rolling Stone. So
Yeah,
up to that point, he has Bowie conduct a few interviews as you mentioned, and there's one at the midpoint of the film where someone conducts an interview and he sort of derides Bowie and he makes him perform his mime for him so that he can have some self-satisfaction of laughing at him.
yeah.
And honestly, I think even if you considered a music artist, newly washed up, I think if you heard Space Oddity, and you were mind blown, how could you sit there in an interview capacity and belittle him? I
Yeah.
think if a music artist that I knew and I loved, who made one of the greatest songs of all time, and then a series of stinkers or even just whimpers, I would still, respect them and love to meet them. There are plenty of,
Absolutely.
one-hit wonders who are still massively respected. Come on Eileen by Dexy's Midnight Runners, that's their only hit. And some people
Of
only have,
course, of course.
one big hit, but I feel like you wouldn't invite that person to an interview and then, chat shit about them.
Of course, of course. I think it even goes to show if you can make that one hit, you're still an exceptionally talented individual. Do you know what I mean? And I think it was quite unfair of that dude to sort of ridicule Bowie like that. Do you know what I mean? It was very insulting and yeah, clearly that this man is a very talented musician. Otherwise, why even entertaining his time in the first place? So yeah, I thought it was really kind of made me a bit angry. Yeah.
And we've talked about how Johnny Flynn doesn't necessarily nail the voice of David Bowie, his speaking voice, but we
Yeah.
haven't really talked about his singing accuracy. And of course, in films like Bohemian Rhapsody, they have a voice double. Taron Egerton performed all of the music in Rocket Man, but here I was surprised to hear that even though I'm aware that Johnny Flynn is a musician, I was surprised to hear that he'd be performing the music himself, but I suppose he had to because
Completely. Yeah.
there was no previous recordings because none of the music is David Bowie's.
I'm really surprised
There were no
actually at that.
recordings to sort of have him lip sync.
I'm
But
surprised that, yeah, I didn't know that.
yeah, and we've talked about how his speaking voice isn't too dead on, and neither is his singing voice. And quite weirdly, the character of Terry, who's David Bowie's half brother, weirdly sounds more like David Bowie when he sings than Johnny Flynn does. That there's a moment at the end where he sings as part of dramatic therapy, which then sort of influences Bowie to create the persona of Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like it's a bad sign when when one of your supporting actors has a more accurate portrayal,
Yeah, it is, isn't
voice
it?
performance
No,
wise.
it is. I think the Terry subplot about him struggling with his mental health and things like that. I thought that was really interesting having to go down. Clearly that David Bowie presenting this film is a very vulnerable individual and things like that. And I thought it paid off in the end because it really did sort of outline that deep character study. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I did love seeing that, but I feel like the non-linear narrative of those moments sort of lets the film down.
Yeah.
I feel like if you'd sort of up top given us all that context and then throughout seeing him, react to that, because there are moments where he's, on drugs, where he's, in a high anxiety moment where he, flashes back to his childhood and, he thinks of that moment. But I feel like, if we just had the scenes up front and then had him, had little snippets whenever he's, sort of having an anxiety attack or, a drug fueled sort of hallucination.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have maybe been more appropriate because
Completely.
I feel like the narrative structure does let the film a bit down because I don't think the revelations are earth-shatteringly, surprising. I knew a little bit about David Bowie, and learning that he has sort of family members with mental illness, wasn't massively surprising. So I feel like they were building
Mhm.
up to a revelation, the fact that he was in a psychiatric hospital,
Yeah.
instead of the home that it seemed that he was driving into.
Yeah.
I feel like that's not as like, oh damn, as they thought.
Mhm.
So I feel like the structure only really serves to confuse the audience.
That's a really smart point. Yeah, I thought, for a start, sorry, I thought, at the start of the film, or potentially, when they introduced that sort of plot line, I thought they were maybe going to suggest like none of the events actually happened, and that would be a potential excuse for them to say, yeah, it is sort of part of it is fictionalized because it was maybe a vision of Bowie's or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Turns
I'm
out he
glad.
was he was in the record label office the entire
Yeah,
time.
yeah, something like that. I'm glad they did go that route, but I think that's a really smart point you just articulated there for sure. Absolutely.
Did you have anything further to say on the film, Matthew?
I have nothing from me, buddy. I suppose did you want to rate it out of 10 for maybe like a quality and then maybe as a biopic in a sense, just as we sometimes
Yeah.
do for many reviews. So I'll hand it over to you for that one.
So if you know nothing about David Bowie and you don't know which songs in the film are his, it's none, by the way. But you might think going in, sure, that could be a David Bowie song. Like, if you don't know the musician and you don't know his music,
Yeah.
some of the music within the film sounds David Bowie esque. The song that I mentioned, that Johnny Flynn wrote, "Good Old Jane," I believe it's called. It's not like Bowie. I feel like it's perfectly admirable song. So I feel like if you went in and you just watched the film, it's about a musician that you have no knowledge of. There's no context to sort of drag it down. Just a film, 9.5 out of 10. I
Yeah.
thought it was
Oh
great.
wow. Yeah. Nice one. Yeah. I think
What would you say quality wise?
I think for me, I think potentially, like we were sort of saying, certain scenes towards the end do feel out of place, but I think there is a really great movie under there. I think pacing did feel off for me, but that being said, I think the movie, this is one of the movies where it's definitely carried by how well it's shot, the cinematography, but also the performances. I think it probably levels off at maybe like a 7.5 for me.
Mm,
Quality wise, I think it's way too harshly received. I think even as a quality as a movie, it's nowhere near, a 1 out of 5 for me anyway. I think people have been way too harsh in this one.
yeah, it's just that if you're making a film about David Bowie, it needs to have a certain level of prestige, and
It
this is
does. It
sort of a
does.
quiet indie film, about a struggling musician, and I feel like that is a very admirable narrative, but it's just not David Bowie. So, while I was watching, I was like, I love indie films. I love the idea of a musician needing to prove himself. So that's why I sort of love the film quality wise. But of course, we've talked about its inauthenticity, its lack of sanctioning by the estate.
Yeah.
As a biopic, it does not capture David Bowie's life. So purely as a biopic, it's like a 1 out of 10.
Yeah,
Like,
one or a
I mean,
two
of
for me
course,
as
of
well.
course, it represents some events. It loosely adapts, some things that did happen to David Bowie, and it chronicles his rise to become Ziggy Stardust. So, I mean, there are some accuracies, but capturing his presence and the richness of his career, I feel like it feels completely.
Yeah, I think you smashed it there, buddy. To be honest, I just want to echo what you said completely.
Mm,
But yeah, I suppose that wraps up another mini review in the channel. Thanks very much for
yeah.
introducing me to another film, buddy. Appreciate that. And yeah, it's always good to have another another new release under our belt as well. So yeah, thanks very much for today, everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Stardust or David Bowie's music in general. We'd love to hear them. Always brightens up our day. And yeah, of course, um, we will link down below our email, time codes, and things like that as well. And I'll actually try and find Bowie's album as well if you just want to give it a listen for sure. But yeah, hope you guys are all safe and well. But your family and friends are all safe and well as well. Take care, everyone, and bye bye.
Bye.